Greetings, Dabblers of the Internet. Today I'm going to be bringing you a quick top 5 and worst 5 changes in the new Drukhari Codex from Warhammer 40,000.
It's beautiful. I've looked at this for 5 hours now.
So what are some of the good changes? Well, one that doesn't count is the new artwork. So already I can tell you it is just so nice to have a book that has a different cover.
No, it's not as good as the other one.
Because when we went from 7th to 8th, if you're not familiar, the 7th and 8th had the same cover art. The border changed, the fonts changed, there's a lot of little subtle changes from the exterior of the book, and obviously the blurb on the back, but the art stayed the same, and what that made it feel like was that you weren't really getting a new book, even though everything inside was very new. It just felt like, oh, here we go, and same with the Craft World book. It was, yeah, all of the books from 7th to 8th, you didn't feel like you were buying a new book. Number 1. Flexibility in army building. In the original 8th edition Codex, you will recall that the Drukhari Codex was subdivided into 3 different sub-factions. And this was kind of flavorful, because you do have the Cabals, which are all the Cabalites and the Archons and their vehicles, and you do have the Witch Cults, which kind of crammed in all the kind of the speeders, such as the Reavers and the Hellions, and it also crammed in some of the Beastmaster stuff too, so it was kind of a mishmash. And then you also had the Covens, the homunculi Covens. Problem is they were so distinct in the way that you had to bring them. You had to bring them in separate detachments, so it was pretty hard to try and make a balance force that contained all of it, that were also in the confines of the current list building way. Now, what they have done is they have given us 2 different ways to build a varied force. You could just go for the one kind of sub-faction and purely build that way, and that will probably be the easiest, because these are a bit trickier, but you have 2 different ways. You can make a real space raid, which allows you to, in one detachment, make it contain some homunculi covens, some cabals, and some cults. They can all be in the one detachment, so long as they have one of the troop choices from each of those sub-factions and one of the HQs from each of those sub-factions. And the Archon is kind of the leader of it all. In any case, what this allows you to do is you can have one detachment where you can kind of sprinkle in all those extra things while still leaving you 2 extra detachments to fulfill something a bit more specific. Because one of the problems before is, yes, you could take 3 separate patrol detachments to cover all the different sub-factions, but the problem was those patrols limit things like your heavies and your fasts. So if you actually wanted to bring in, say, what the Witch Cults do best, which is some of their fast attack, you could only bring 2 in the patrol detachment. Whereas now, if you have a real space raid detachment, you have an outrider detachment that you could also take in addition. And this will all keep it all together. Obviously, you'll still have to pay the CP in order to bring that outrider detachment, but now you have the room for it, whereas before you did not. The other way that you can take them is through the raiding forces special rule. So what this allows you to do is that you can put together your army as before with the 3 different patrol detachments, and these can contain either Cabal, Witch Cult, or Homunculus units separated into their different detachments, and you pay 0 CP. So that is like the old version that we used to have, where you could take the 3 different patrol detachments without a penalty, but now you also have the real space raid. So you've got 2 different ways to do it, and that's really exciting. Number 2, the addition of the Lords of Comrade and their favoured retinues. So this is harkening back to the older times, where you used to have not only your Cabalites and not only your Witches, but you had the upgraded versions of these 2 units. You had the Cabalite Trueborn, and you had the Blood Brides. And so what these represented were some of the more honed, or in this case the Trueborn, the purer Drukhari that have heightened abilities, heightened funds in order to get better weapons, and all that kind of thing. Now, they aren't quite completely brought back, in that there's not an actual datasheet entry for them, but what they have done is that if you bring what is called a Lord of Comrade, in which you've kind of upgraded one of your Succubi, Archon, or Homunculi to a Master, this then unlocks your ability to bring the upgraded form of one of the troop choices, be it a Trueborn Cabalite, a Blood Bride Witch, or also a new one, a Homoxite, which is part of the Rax upgrade. And these are fantastic. So if you take a look, it obviously requires a points increase on the model because they get a stat boost as well as gaining some special rules that really play into the way that these different troops excel. For instance, when you look at the Trueborn increase, they get increased ballistic skill and modifiers don't affect how they shoot. So it really just shows them as the ultimate marksman. And while you can't give them increased numbers of heavy weapons and special weapons, what you can do at least is know that they are going to really hit. And if they're around your Master Homunculus, not Master Homunculus, your Master Archon, they're going to be rerolling ones on their 2+ to hit, and so they're essentially not going to miss. So that's going to be a really cool unit. It doesn't break the game because you can't make the whole army with it, you can't fill Venoms with it as you used to be able to, but what it does do is it does enable you to have something a little bit more exciting, and it means you have these conversion opportunities that allow you to make each unit even more unique. Number 3 is the changes to covens. So while these aren't crazy changes, what it does mean is you will see some more choice in the different kinds of coven obsessions that people will be taking. In 8th edition, most people would have taken the Prophets of the Flesh covens, because the Prophets of the Flesh was a straight upgrade to your Invulnerable save. It also provided you with the best relic, being the Vexator Mask, one of the best named characters, which gave a wonderful aura to all your things. So it was essentially a better homunculus, which is Urian Rakarth, and it had the best stratagem, which is the Black Cornucopians. Essentially, you've got a weak unit that's been shot to pieces and there's only one left. Well, why not bring it back at full health? It was fantastic. And so this combination of all the best things in one subfaction and then none of the other ones had anything particularly exciting about them meant that no one would take the others. So now they've toned down Prophets of the Flesh. It's still got some durability in terms of its ability to heal rather than prevent damage, but it's now a bit different in the way it plays. It still contains the Vexator Mask and Urian Rakarth, but now Black Cornucopians is gone. Instead, we now have a few improvements to the other sub-factions so that they have a bit more of a bite. Unfortunately, I have to say that I think Dark Creed, which still works on modifying your opponent's leadership and trying to make them run away more, is still just not going to really cut it, because leadership modification in general just doesn't seem to be doing very well in the way that they've crafted the rules for 8th and 9th. Mainly because since about 50% of the players that you'll be facing will be Space Marines, and Space Marines almost always ignore combat attrition tests or have ways of getting around it, you're not going to see much return on that kind of angle of play, which is really annoying considering it is almost a whole phase of the game dedicated to the combat attrition test, and yet it seems that it almost plays little to no role when it comes to 50% of the armies. But hopefully that will be addressed eventually. But at least we now have more choice because we've also got the Psychic Awakening custom covens, so you can now craft your own ones, including with Dark Technomancers, which I know a lot of people like. Number 4, probably one of the most exciting ones because I spent a lot of the Australian lockdown painting these, and that's Witch Cults are good. They're really good. I'm not kidding. So, I said before, Witch Cults, fragile, kind of fast, a few attacks but no AP. So what was it going to do when it gets there? Not much. A lot of the time when I would charge my witches in, it was to tie things up so that other things could get there. Particularly the covens would come in afterwards. But now, what they've done is they've kind of tweaked everything by a good amount. So they've given more attacks, fantastic. They've given more armor piercing in the form of the straight up weapons that they have, but also through blade artists. So you roll a 6 to wound, wow, you're going to get another -1 AP. And then you've got the Blood Brides, so they're even better. You've got a whole squad that could really act as a scalpel, going straight through the enemy. Whereas before, all the witches were the same, they all hit kind of like pillows towards the end of 8th edition, and you just needed something a bit, I guess, harder to hit if you're going to send it in that fast. Because the way that the playstyle was before was that you could actually get there really fast. But the problem was, it wasn't really an alpha strike if you're not really bringing the strike. So you're hitting first, but with what? So now everything is fantastic. They haven't really increased the defensive nature of it, so really it's a glass nuclear warhead. So it's gone from being a glass kind of mallet to real like glass hammer, or glass warhammer. So it's going to hit hard, you're going to lose a lot if you get hit back, but if you play it right, I think it's going to be fantastic. So definitely make sure you chuck all of your witches and stuff into either the webway or you're going to put them into vehicles, because running across the battlefield isn't really going to lead to very good outcomes. Now, one final thing about the witch cults is they've also changed up the drugs. I mean, they've just changed up so many things, but they also improved the combat drugs. So combat drugs were awesome because you could kind of tweak your different units in different ways, but you could only take one of each before you could double up. And so you'd try and spread them out over different units, you know, essentially having extra units so that they could soak it up, so you could have your good units with the ones you wanted, such as, you know, the ones that would increase your strength or increase your attacks. But now they've changed it, so you can now pick any of them for one, or you can roll dice to randomly determine two, so you can get two effects. You can't get the same one, so you can't get strength 5 witches running around, at least not through the drugs only. But you definitely can combine them in ways that are a bit more interesting and random. So I'll try both, because why not? And it just goes to show that, you know, just a simple change like just giving the drugs out more, because, I mean, really, if we're talking about Dark Elder, they are not going to hold themselves back and be like, has everyone got one of each kind of drug? Okay, now we'll give out some more. That's not how. They're kind of the excess minus the Slanesh, and so they should be able to go nuts on the drugs. And I'm happy to say that they can now. Number 5, kind of tying into the witch cults, but I think it deserves its own special mention, is the improvement of Hellions. I'm sure all of us have got a nice little collection of Hellions just sitting away in a drawer, on a shelf. Mine are down there on that shelf, unpainted. Maybe painted, but you never really felt like it. I certainly didn't. All of 8th edition. I did try and bring them out, unpainted. I know, a big no-no. But I did try and bring them out just to see, are they good now? Because I remember seeing, as their first War Scroll, data sheet came out, I saw that they had damage 2, and I thought, hey, damage 2, that's pretty good. It's going to slice the Primaris in half. Problem is, it had no AP. So it would just bounce straight off, and ultimately you would kill nothing. And, to top it all off, while they were carrying that weapon, they were essentially just a Cabalite that could move a little bit faster. So they were ultra easy to shoot down. They just had 5 up armor, and that was it. Toughness 3. Well, now kind of all the things have been addressed, apart from the armor, which is fair, because it literally is a skater punk on a hoverboard. But what they do have now is toughness 4. That's really cool. They've got 2 wounds, double the life, and they haven't really increased in points that much. Finally, they've also got an extra attack, so 3 attacks. So suddenly, you've got a really great base stat line. Then you combine that with the drugs I just mentioned, and suddenly you've got a real hammer unit that can move fast. It can move faster than witches. I think it's 14 inches. That's really fast. So you can have a swarm of them, up to 10. You can combine this with their cool stratagems, and they've got more stratagems. Everyone used to really say, oh, Hellions are good. If only we could really use their... Everyone used to say, oh, Hellions, they're not that great, but at least they have eviscerating flyby if you can make that work. But that never really was much of a draw card because it only happened on 6s and then 5s on infantry. Well, now that's just been improved because now it happens 5s in general and therefore 4s on infantry, which is pretty awesome. So, yeah, you just get your mortal wounds with that way, but also they have another stratagem, and they really needed this one, and this one's really cool, is when they're near Reavers, which are the jet bike guys, when they're near those, then they get to re-roll their hits. It's a kind of a stratagem that shows that they have a rivalry between them. In fact, yeah, what's it called? Deadly Rivals. So, yeah, fantastic. It's so cool. So now you'll bring one squad of one, and the one squad of the other, and you'll have them going up near each other, and they'll be vying to be both the fastest, the deadliest, and it's just exactly the way it should be. It should be these kind of gangs that are doing crazy stuff, they're hitting hard, they're all punks, so they're just going to get shot up, but they don't really care, because as long as they get a little bit of pain out of the enemy, that's all worth it in the end. Now to move on to the negative part of the video, and it's safe to say that none of it is actually that bad. None of it breaks the Drukhari as a whole. Instead, it's really just some more nitpicks. And so I'm really happy to talk about these because it just goes to show how great a codex that this is, that you can look at everything at least on paper. I haven't really played one of this yet, but you can look at everything on paper and be like, you know what, I'll take that. That's worth it. Especially Hellions. Yes, Hellions are great. So, what are part of the worst 5? Well, I've already kind of mentioned one, in which obviously the Covens got changed up a bit, and our Prophets of the Flesh are no longer just the shrug off all the shots kind of army. They're still going to do a fantastic job of that. They still have a 5-up invul, and they still have the kind of the way to shrug off wounds, and you can heal them now too, but they're definitely not going to be as easy to use as they used to be. So that's kind of a number one. Number two for the worst in this new codex is unfortunately the Court of the Archon, which is comprised of some of the coolest and most flavoursome models that come in the Drukhari Codex. They bring in some kind of exoticness to an already very exotic army. But unfortunately, what they've now done with this new codex completely kind of changes how they work. So in previous codexes, the Court of the Archon were separate models. Essentially, they were individual small characters. You had your Slith, which was a dedicated bodyguard unit. You had the Lamayan, who had some kind of poison attacks usually. You had the Urgul, which was usually just like kind of a tough monkey. And then you also had the Medusae, who actually provided a bit of a shooting attack. Now you could just take these and they wouldn't be much of a point stump, and they could round out your army list. And that would be really helpful when you have that 15 points left over, 20 points left over. You've got all the guns that you need, so why not just get a little extra bodyguard for your Archon? Unfortunately, it's kind of completely different now. So it is now all in one unit. So those 4 separate profiles and those 4 separate sets of special abilities that describe these units are now all in the one unit. So when you take this one unit, you have to keep track of all those different things. But that's not so hard. Harlequin players do it all the time when they've got their Harlequins and they have different tools, have their different war gear. But this is kind of different because you've got lots of different profiles, so there's different strength, toughness, leadership, all these kinds of things, but you also have different abilities pertaining to each of the different models. So it kind of compounds. It's a very complicated unit. Then you've got these different models that don't want to do the same thing as each other. Like I said, they have their different roles. You have the Slith, who is a bodyguard, and so you could take a unit of 4 Slith because the new Court of the Archon unit has to be taken at a minimum of 4. So if you want just bodyguards, you have to take 4 of them. So go out and buy 4 resin Sliths. Thank you very much. Or if you want to bring something else, such as the Lamayan, which has the ability to increase the poison of your Cabal units, you'll probably have to bring 4. Or you bring 1 and then bring 3 Slith, but then you don't want the Lamayan to get into close combat, but it's kind of stuck with the unit. So essentially what this forces you to do is essentially purchase things in your army that you don't want and you don't need. Now, the Slith surely is probably the best option because what it does provide is a really good bodyguard unit that prevents your Archon from being targeted. But now, the new problem is that the Court of the Archon now falls into the same problem that Warlocks do. So, if you're familiar with Craft Worlds, and now we're straying into the more weaker cousins of the Drukhari, but if you're familiar with Craft Worlds, they have both the Warlocks individual, so one Warlock, or you can take them in a Warlock Conclave. But unless you're putting that Warlock Conclave in a massive unit of jet bikes, it is a terrible idea. Why? Primary reason is that a single Warlock cannot be targeted because they are a character, and if they're near a unit, they cannot be targeted through the Lookout Sir special rule. The moment you put them into a Warlock Conclave, they become a unit and can be fully targeted. And I tell you, when people realise anytime I tell them, oh yeah, that's a Warlock Conclave, it gets shot straight away. That's not a very good bodyguard unit in my experience. And the problem is, when you take a look at, say, a unit of 4 Slith, that's a unit of 4 Slith that have toughness 3 and they have a 5-up save. So they're actually going to be blown away really quickly. And they're quite expensive, so why not just get something a bit more durable as your bodyguard, say as, a unit of Cabalites. They're cheaper, they blend in better, and you'll have them anyway. You're taking a bunch of Cabalites if you have an Archon. So it's almost like you have to go out of your way to include the Court of the Archon, which is not fair because they are really cool models and they do add a kind of like an exciting flavour to your army to show that your Archon has his own special retinue of bodyguards. But yeah, just the way it works, I'm sure people will make it work, but I feel like I have to work too hard. Also, I'm kind of complaining because I have only 2 Slith and I only have a couple of the other ones. So whatever Archon unit I can make, a Court of the Archon unit I can make, just will be subpar, and so therefore I just won't take it at all. So these are just models that will sit on the shelf and not be taken to battles, and that's ultimately the true tragedy. Number 3 is another kind of mishmash kind of unit. It's Beasts. So it's not really a unit. Thankfully it didn't go the same route. You still have your Beastmaster separate to your Beasts, and the Beasts are all separate from each other. But unfortunately, they haven't really changed, and by not changing, they've fallen behind the rest of the Codex. The rest of the Codex is really exciting, but the beasts are kind of, I guess, stuck in the past. Not to say that they're bad sculpts, but they're still stuck in resin. All of it. So the Beastmaster and the beasts are all in resin. So if you want to start building up this kind of part of your army, you're going to have a lot of monopose models made out of the fine cast resin, and it's just not going to be fun to put together. And that's a real shame, because if you think about it, the Beastmaster, he's specializing in capturing any beast, alien beasts. You've got the whole galaxy world of beasts to go after. And he goes for something that's kind of like a gorilla, something kind of like a dog, and something kind of like a bunch of ravens. And that doesn't really scream like, I guess, the full extent of what the galaxy has to offer, because we know there's Tyranids out there, and we know there's things like Tyranids out there, and all other kinds of things on all kinds of planets. And so why isn't there something kind of like a Hydra, something big, or something, I don't know, a swarm of something that's not the birds? But, you know, that's really what it comes down to, is it didn't change, and so therefore it's just kind of bad, because it just didn't improve or change the way it played. One thing I think we can all agree on is my number 4, which is the changes to power from pain in terms of the inert to suffering. So while it's not expected, it's more of a side grade. So before we used to have the 6+ kind of feel no pain. You know, you ignore a wound or mortal wound on a roll of a 6. And this was just pretty damn good, because you never knew what was going to help you. It was like free spirit stones for your vehicles. They can't take spirit stones, I know that. But it was a pretty useful kind of army-wide rule. Now it's changed to a 6+ invulnerable. That's the same, you think. No, it's not, because most of the time you won't care. Because nearly every unit in the entire army has an invulnerable already. You know, we've got the 5+ invulnerables that we see in the Covens, and then all the witches at least have a 6+ invulnerable at base, and it just, nearly everyone has a 6+ invulnerable except for Cabalites, and I guess Hellions. But if they're getting shot at with something enough to take away their armor save, someone's probably not shooting at them with the right thing, because Cabalites and Hellions do not really warrant high armor piercing rounds anyway, so chances are they're just going to get shot by bolters, and they'll still get some form of a 6+ save, be it whatever's left of their armor save or their invulnerable save. So really it's quite meh. And I kind of understand, because having a 6+ feel no pain on everything, especially now that it goes to vehicles, would be crazy. Not crazy, but it'd be perhaps too good. But I don't know if this was the right way to go, because now it really just feels like it doesn't do anything. So my final small complaint, little gripe, are the chapter-approved rules for the secondaries that we can now choose in the Drukhari Codex. So, yes, if you've seen some of the new codexes coming out, they will come with a few of their own secondary objectives that kind of play into the army in a bit of a lore way or a rule way, so playing into the strength of the army. And I definitely have to say that in the Drukhari Codex, these are playing more into the fluff side of things, the lore, rather than the way the actual army plays. So, for instance, we've got these 2 different Purge the Enemy secondaries, and both of them are to do with taking down characters and or monsters. So one's to do with characters and monsters, and one's to do with monsters and beasts. But essentially you have to take them out in the fight phase. So that's very situational, that you will kill that monster in melee when you want it to. Chances are you might want to shoot it, but you might hold it back. You might be like, oh, I don't want to shoot it, I'll send in my witches and hopefully they'll kill it just so I can get a couple of extra victory points. When there's definitely more dependable sources of victory points out there. So while this definitely sounds cool from a lore perspective, because yeah, the Drukhari are all about, you know, challenging fights, it just doesn't really work. So these will probably not be taken unless someone's bringing a super monster heavy like Tyranid list and you've got witch cults, or you've got covens, and you can see that nearly all the time when you're killing something, it'll be in the melee phase. But chances are, if you don't see that happening, you won't be taking these 2 at all. The other 2 are also pretty awful. So Fear and Terror can kind of work, because for each model that flees, you get 1 victory point. So that's each model. Usually your opponent has a lot of models, and so for each one that flees, you get a victory point. However, there's a problem with that. Going against things like Space Marines or anything kind of tougher, you're probably not going to see them flee at all, and if they do, it'll only be once or twice. Definitely this is another situational one. So just like the other one is if they have lots of monsters, if you see them have Imperial Guardsmen or things like that, you might be able to get them to flee quite often. But usually you just want to kill them outright. You don't want to leave anything there and hope, well, I hope they flee so I can get some side points. It's not really going to work like that. So this is a really weird one. And then finally, the last one is Herd the Prey. So this secondary objective involves trying to get the enemy, I guess, corralled around the battlefield. You know, you're herding them to where you want them to be. So it sounds really cool. But in the game, you can't actually decide what your opponent's going to do. If you take that as your secondary objective, they're going to see it and then not fall in for that. And it's something where you're trying to control the opponent that can't actually be done. So it's different to say things like, you know, getting into different table edges or trying to, like, line breaker and things like that. There's quite a few secondaries that are about you moving around the battlefield, but this one is trying to get your opponent to move around the battlefield. And I mean, I guess you could try by putting your threats all over the place, but the way that Drukhari are is they don't really herd things in that same kind of way. The kinds of things that are scared of you, such as, you know, guardsmen or Tau or things that don't want you really getting really close, they're probably not going to be moving that much anyway because they just want to be spending time shooting you rather than trying to run away. So, yeah, overall, these are all very situational. You would only take them, and I mean, that's the flexibility of secondary objective, don't get me wrong. Secondary objectives are all about taking them in the right moments because you can choose them from battle to battle. But I don't think you'll be choosing these ones. I think you'll choose ones that work with the army that you have, and you'll probably forget that these are even here, because these just don't really work very well. The top 5 and the worst 5. The worst weren't so bad, were they? This is actually a fantastic codex. And, I mean, I didn't even touch on some of the, you know, slightly really cool things. These are just my favourite cool things. But, for instance, you know, people will point out that, you know, the Succubus got a huge boost. And now with, depending on the gear that you can take, can bring a bloody truck of attacks, and you can increase the strength of all these different kind of witch cult units using a combination of the drugs and the obsessions. And then there's just new stratagems that are actually useful for all the different obsessions. They're far-reaching changes, and so what I was really hoping to pick were just the top 5 like singular changes that really affect a broader swath of the army as pertains to me, to my heart. We're at the end of the video, so like and subscribe to this eclectic channel for more of this, more of some other things, and some more of what my wife does as well.